So you've been searching marketplace and you just found the perfect bike. And with all that excitement, you reach out to the seller with the standard. Finally, 2 hours later, they respond. Congratulations, you're one step closer to owning a new bike. These next 5 tips when buying a used bike can help you save a ton of money and help you buy a bike and not get burned. The first question that we ask the seller is if they have the proper paperwork. If they don't have the documentation, especially on this new of a bike, that is a major red flag. These bikes are too expensive, and it makes me think that if they can't keep track of the paperwork, how good of condition is the bike in? Also, we start to wonder if the bike is stolen. In most states, off-road bikes will have a title, or in our state here in New York, it's just a registration card. Learn what your state has for paperwork so that you end up asking the right questions. Keep in mind that street legal bikes will always have a title. Once you confirm that they have a title, you need to make sure that it's clean and clear with no current liens recorded. If a loan is previously held on the motorcycle, you want to make sure that they paid it off and there's a lien release with the paperwork. You will always want to get the original of that and it needs to go with the title. Also know that certain ride parks and state-funded trails will not let you ride unless you have the proper paperwork. That could really limit where you use your motorcycle. Secondly, try to understand the seller and find out why they're planning to sell the bike in the first place. The seller is usually pretty open and transparent if it's a solid bike. Keep asking questions and see how it's ridden and if they have any knowledge of the hours or miles on the bike. Most older MX bikes do not have an hour meter unless it was added by the owner. Keep in mind that most newer 4-strokes that are fuel injected can either be plugged in to a dealer tool or like on the Yamahas, they have the YES app where it'll tell you the hours right on your phone. An easy way to get a gauge for the amount of time on a bike if there is no hour meter is to check the wear on the engine casings. Typically on the clutch side where your boot rubs, you will see a ton of wear if the bike has a lot of time. For example, the bike on the right has around 90 hours of ride time and the bike on the left has 0. It's brand new in the showroom. You can see the difference here. Also, this will give you a pretty good idea of what maintenance should have been done to the bike and what to expect. If you are headed to the seller's house, it's never a bad idea to look at their truck in the driveway to see how that's maintained. If they're good at taking care of their truck, there's a better chance that their motorcycle has been taken care of as well. It's always a great idea to take a friend, especially one that has riding experience. Maybe they can help you spot something on the bike that you might not have caught in either the pictures or in your inspection. And keep in mind, you're buying the bike, so you're excited. You might be overlooking things. Our third tip is to inspect the bike. By now you should have looked at the pictures in the ad over pretty well. And if there's anything that looked out of place, you should have noted this already to look at specifically when you arrive at the house. Most sellers are not great at taking pictures, or they might not be showing something on purpose. It is a great idea to have this in mind when you're doing your walk around. The first thing you should do when you get to the seller's house is to walk up to the bike and feel the radiator. It's important to do this to know if they just had the bike running before you arrived. If you had texted them and said I'll be there in 10 minutes, they might be prepping that bike to make sure it's running perfectly. The reason for this is if the bike has starting issues, they might be hiding that if I've already started it. I would not touch the exhaust because that gets out extremely quick. This next part is where you can start to save yourself some money by inspecting the wear items. If you see the fork seals are leaking, you can assume the forks will need to be rebuilt as well as new front brake pads. When your forks start to leak, your front brake pads can get soaked in oil, and once that happens, you need to replace them. Next, I would open the radiator cap and look for coolant. It's not super important as to what coolant is in the bike, but to make sure that it has it. Coolant is super cheap and I highly recommend you flush it once you get the bike home anyways. It is super important to look at the air filter on the bikes. With the Betas, this is super easy by removing the seat and the side panel. If the air filter is worn or dirty, that is not a great sight and you can start to wonder about the internals of the engine. If you can, I would recommend removing the air filter and look into the carb boot to see how clean it is. Even if the seller tried to pull a fast one by replacing the air filter, they usually never take the time to clean the inside of the air boot. And when you look in there, you can typically see if it's got dirt, that's what the engine has been sucking in. Dirt bikes are full of bearings, such as wheel bearings, steering stem, linkage, and swing arm. It is important to check these over. It's not if they need replaced, it's when. And it's easy to inspect all these. It can be done on the side stand, but it's preferable if you have a moto stand where you can pick the bike up off the ground. Wheel bearings are one of the major things that fail and are always being replaced. It's super easy to tell. We're going to take a bike, pick it up off the ground, and we're going to wiggle the tire side to side, and we're feeling for any kind of playing or ratcheting. The linkage, shock, and swing arm bearings are all going to be felt roughly at the same time. To do this, simply pick up on the rear wheel while the bike is up on the stand. If you feel an up and down play, start to have a closer look up underneath the bike and see what part is moving the most. The lower shock bearing is typically the one that fails the most. The steering stem bearings can be checked with the bike first on the stand. Start by grabbing the bars and turning them side by side. You're feeling for a smooth movement without any ratcheting or catching. The next thing to do is to pull the front wheel at an angle, and you're feeling for that same play and ratcheting that you felt in the rear. The steering stem bearings can also be checked with the bike on the ground. I recommend having a flat area that you can push the bike forward and back. This is where you will grab the front brake and feel for a binding below the handlebars. If you feel a ratchet, there's a good chance these bearings need replaced. It's not the end of the world if these bearings need to be replaced. They are all considered wear items, and they're usually sold in kits that are super reasonable in the aftermarket world. But this is a bargaining tool for you. For example, if the ad didn't say that it needed linkage bearings, you can use that to help lower the cost when you need to replace them. Next, check the chain, sprockets, and chain slider for wear. It is common for the front chain slider that rests on the swing arm to get worn out. The next thing we need to check is the brake pads, rotors, and calipers. It is really easy to see the back brake pads and not too difficult to see the front pads. The rotors can easily be inspected by taking your finger and feeling for grooves where the brake pads run. Again, these are wear items that will need to be replaced from time to time. Also, with the brakes, you should feel for a solid grab in the handlebar. If the brakes feel soft, you may need to bleed your front brake line. I always recommend flushing your brake fluid every 2 seasons. The next thing you want to do with a bike on the moto stand is spin the rims and look for cracks or dents. If there's a big dent, that could mean the bike took a hard landing or had a good crash. Loose spokes are pretty common as people don't seem to check them. Doing all these things and inspecting the bike will only take you a few minutes, but might save you a ton of money. My fourth tip is to start the bike. Starting the bike should always be done after looking it over. If the seller has an issue with this and you're not there to buy a full-on project bike, that is a huge red flag for me and typically a deal breaker. If the bike is electric start, the battery should sound healthy and start the bike within a few cranks. If we are looking at an older kickstart only bike, it is a great idea to kick the bike over slowly a few times before you even try to actually start the bike. This will give you a feel for the engine's compression. If the kicker falls too easily, that can mean that the bike is low in compression and that results in top-end motor wear. Once the bike has been started, let it warm up before revving the engine quickly. Warming the engine should always be done when starting a bike. With the bike idling, put your ear down near the engine and listen for unusual sounds. 2-stroke and 4-stroke engines will have different engine characteristics. Our fifth and final tip is understanding the price. As a dealer, we need to buy the bike at a fair trade-in price that allows us to do our maintenance and service the bike before we resell the unit. For you, headed to the seller's house or maybe even to a dealership to look at a used bike, there are a lot of ways for you to determine a fair price before you head to the dealer. Search Marketplace and Cycle Trader for comparable bikes to see what they are selling for. Also, check out Kelley Blue Book or NADA guides for current MSRP pricing. If the ad says that he wants $8,000 for a bike and it's only showing $5,000 for a great condition, is it even worth going to check the bike out? The cool thing with used bikes is that they usually have some really good accessories already installed, which will save you money. The seller might mention all of these things in the ad, which can reflect on the price, but you should not expect to pay retail for used accessories no matter how new or clean they are. You might also score some spare parts and manuals that are more model specific. Keep the negotiations reasonable and fair. It doesn't usually end well if you lowball the seller, and that is just a waste of time. While you're inspecting the bike, keep track of the things that you notice that will require your attention. These are negotiation tools, and they are hard proof that there's a reason for a reduce in price. Hopefully, you can find common ground that makes a deal for both you and the seller. Thanks for watching our video. I hope you found this helpful. These are all cool tips and ones that we've used when negotiating for a used bike. Please consider liking and subscribing our channel. Enjoy the ride.